it's never been just a football game.
These schools don't like each other.
Unbelievable tradition, unbelievable passion.
You see, you've got this river. They call it red, but it ain't really red. Just like they call this game a rivalry, but it ain't really. It's not a civil war, it's not a holy war, and no one is getting a little brown jug for winning. This is Texas versus Oklahoma, and it's real. Pretenders and fakers don't even show up. This is a game played by young men who tip their caps to single ladies and make sure grandma gets to church on Sunday morning. Crimson or burnt orange, those are the only two choices. For the 40 times the crimson has won, legend has it that the Oklahoma birth rate has gone up the following year. For the 58 times the burnt orange has won, legend has it the droughts have ended, the sick have been healed, and maybe, just maybe, one or two dead Texas X's have resurrected. Now, there are some teams that actually play football up north or way out there in the far west, but in Oklahoma and Texas, it is not the game of football, but football as the religion of the people. Football in this part of God's creation unites or separates fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, coaches and players. In 1900, these people started playing football. Oklahoma was a brand new school, and they traveled some dusty road down to Austin and challenged the Texas 11 to a game. The Oklahoma team took it on the chin, literally, and got beat 28-2. In 1912, the game debuted at the Texas State Fair in Dallas. Oklahoma, led by their star Claude Reeds, beat Texas. In 1929, the game became permanently affixed to the Texas State Fair. And in 1932, the game debuted at Fair Park Stadium in South Dallas, now known as the Cotton Bowl. This stadium has been the location of the game every year since 1932, and more precious memories were created here than any football locale west of the Mississippi River. Men with names like Bible, Royal, and Wilkinson stalked the sidelines with clipboards and playbooks, embodying the bright hope and earnest dreams of at least 1 million expectant, crazed followers, all wearing their color of choice. Players with names that read like a football Hall of Fame: Campbell and Washington, Pruitt and Peters, Street and Bradford, McCoy and Williams. 17 times these teams have faced each other, ranked in the Associated Press top 10. Oklahoma's accomplishments include a winning streak of 47 games, 7 national championships, and 17 players inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Texas's storied history includes winning over 800 regular season football games and playing in 48 bowl games, with 4 national championships. Number 4 came in the epic battle against USC in the 2006 Rose Bowl. Dana X. Bible, the genial gentleman, coached the Texas Longhorns to respectability. Leading the team during the dark days of the Great War, Bible left the University of Nebraska and accepted his calling in Austin, bringing Longhorn football to the throne of national prominence. In Bible's first 2 seasons, Oklahoma made him wish he'd never left Lincoln. But after those losses, his revamping of the Longhorn defense held the Sooners to fewer than 10 touchdowns in the next 8 years, and laid the foundation that confounded the Sooners. It also opened the door for a former Minnesota Golden Gopher quarterback named Charles Burnham Wilkinson to establish order in the Sooner world. Wilkinson served 1 year as an assistant coach to Jim Tatum before becoming the head coach that would propel Oklahoma to national renown.
I think that to understand some of what this rivalry is all about, you do look at the dominance of eras. Texas had had the upper hand in the early days of it. Bud Wilkinson arrives, and Oklahoma wins 8 in a row.
It's often said that Oklahoma is most famous for football, but there is, of course, the musical. When Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote about how the wind comes sweeping through the plain, they had to have been thinking about Bud Wilkinson's teams. Out of his famous split T formation, the Sooners were a poised blend of speed and power. The Sooners outran you. It was as if they were playing with 12 or 14 players on the field. They were that fast. There was nothing in the known college football universe that prepared anyone for what Bud Wilkinson brought. It was football, but it was much more. With movie star good looks and a quiet, soft-spoken demeanor, he brought class and grace to a game that was lacking in both. And of course, he brought winning, which, as everyone realized, is the name of the game.
Bud Wilkinson, they call him the Great White Father, had that white hair and that calm demeanor, looked and acted more like an English professor, but brought together a bunch of great football players.
Rivalry was changed dramatically when Bud Wilkinson became the head coach, and that was actually a result of happenings of World War II. Norman had a naval base, believe it or not. Norman, with not oceans kind of quite a ways away from Norman. There was a naval base, and the naval base had a team called the Zoomers, a football team called the Zoomers. Of course, in those days during World War II, all the athletes, everybody was in the service, all the males. And he recruited these guys that were on the Zoomers. And that really changed the whole thing about rivalry OU Texas, because now Oklahoma had the athletes.
In 1948, President Truman signed the Marshall Plan to save Europe. It's unfortunate there was no safety provision in that plan to protect the Longhorns from the storm Bud Wilkinson's Sooners were about to unleash. If you were a Longhorn fan, this was going to be ugly. It was going to remain that way for a long time.
The Sooners held a 20-7 cushion with 5:20 showing on the clock. After a great return on the ensuing kickoff, Tom Landry punched in a touchdown a few plays later, and suddenly the score was 20-14 with 3:51 still left. A pumped-up Longhorn squad smothered the Sooners on their next possession and took over on their own 37 for the final charge. But on third down, Thomas picked off the tip pass to stop the Longhorns in their tracks. It was over. Oklahoma had stopped the 8-year skid with a 20-14 upset. For the first time since it was created in 1941 as a symbolic prize for the victor, the Golden Hat went to Oklahoma.
Perhaps the greatest run in college football history with the 47-game winning streak, and really set in motion, you know, he's called the man who made the monster. So he really set in motion the Oklahoma football machine.
You know, I think more than anything, Bud Wilkinson, you know, kind of changed the way Oklahomans thought about themselves and their football program. You know, he rose above the program. Here's a guy who later, you know, ran for the U.S. Senate and coached in the NFL. And he was kind of bigger than life. And I think he kind of transformed the whole thinking that Oklahomans had at the time.
I don't think you'll ever see anybody else be able to put an era like Bud Wilkinson did in the late 40s and early 50s. The games he won, he just won them on a consistent basis. He dominated a conference that was supposed to be pretty good. You know, it's just guy after guy after guy. They weren't highly recruited. They were from Oklahoma, maybe the panhandle of Texas. He recruited some guys from New Mexico. Wasn't like, they weren't a national program like Notre Dame that was pulling guys from everywhere. Just local Oklahoma guys that just dominated college football.
The thing that Bud Wilkinson lived off of was having, you know, very quick, skilled teams. You know, the linemen got off the ball real quick, very solid on fundamentals. I mean, really dominated college football in the 50s and set the standard even now for programs. I mean, he was popular enough that he could run for Senate in the state of Oklahoma in 1962. Did ABC College Football. He was a remarkable household name during that time, and he was the guy that really brought, I think, national prominence in the TV age to this series.
Wilkinson was able to gather the talent in his state, recruit a little bit outside the state and elevate that program to the best program levels in the country. Once it got there, this thing has been a war ever since.
Bud Wilkinson, Oklahoma. Wins 145. Conference championships 14. National championships 3. Recruits: Billy Vessels, Tommy McDonald, Jerry Tubbs. I've been to 100 places around the world, and I can honestly say Texas is my least favorite. What are they known for? Bad food? Toll roads? Boomer Sooner. You can't choose your parents, but you can sure choose your football coach. For many athletes who wore the burnt orange, Darrell K. Royal was parent, teacher, coach, and ultimately, friend. A child of the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, he understood what the game of football can mean in the life of a young man. Royal was smart, ethical, and a master innovator in a game of copycats. He led the Longhorns from his heart, which, as the legend goes, is the beaming light that shines in the eyes of Texas.
There was the attitude that we are Texas, and we're not going to have Oklahoma roll over us. We're not going to have Texas A&M roll over us or anything else like that. He brought that kind of mindset, I think, to a lot of the guys, and that not only were they going to stand up to those teams, but that they could also be a dominant national power.
Nobody was going to outwork him. Nobody was going to go out and out-recruit him. Nobody was going to be able to say that he was not prepared. And although seem to say the same thing about him, the fact is that he was a guy that was here early. He worked at what he was doing. He got good athletes, and then he had that demeanor when you were around him. He was very calm.
See, Darrell's a guy from Oklahoma that went to Texas, and so you have the interchange there between the two. The feeling when Darrell Royal got the coaching job down there was that, well, you know, everybody has to earn a living.
I think the 1958 Texas-Oklahoma game validated Darrell Royal and his program at Texas. It was something that Texas fans had longed for because Oklahoma, in that really great era of the final years of Bud Wilkinson in the 50s there, had really done a great job of controlling the landscape of college football. And when Texas won in 1958, it not only began a Texas string where the Longhorns won 12 of the next 13 ball games, but it put Darrell Royal on the map as a young coach who at that time was only 33, who was one of the up-and-coming guys in college football. And his win in that ball game really said Texas is here to stay, and I'm here to stay with them.
And Texas held one last time for the enormous upset, with Lackey himself pulling down the game-saving interception. The legend goes that Darrell Royal was so overwhelmed by beating his mentor that he threw up after the game.
It has been said that one could either embrace the wishbone or wish that you'd embrace the wishbone as you're looking for your next coaching job. It's not so much a football formation, but a battle plan that rips the heart out of a defense. It was a whole new way of looking at the game, brought to you by the UT Brain Trust.
Well, the wishbone began when Emory Ballard, who was a talented coach in his own right, a great high school coach who had won state championships, was on his staff as the offensive coordinator, running back coach, and they started tinkering with it in the spring. And Bill Little, who was on the staff at the University of Texas, kept asking Emory Ballard, you have all these great, running backs. How are you going to get them all on the field? How are you going to decide which one you're going to pick? And Emory Ballard kind of looked at Bill Little and said, well, maybe we'll just start all of them.
It's what the spread is now, the wishbone was then. Darrell Royal came up with it, the triple option, and used it to a huge advantage in winning the 1969 national championship.
And it pretty much revolutionized college football, as we know it. Texas ended up winning 30 straight games and a pair of national championships. Emory Ballard went on to be a head coach at Texas A&M. From there, everybody wanted to know about this secret offense. How did it work? How did you run it? How much time do you have to spend with it?
And to see how many teams literally tried to copy or invented somewhat copies of Royal's Wishbone in itself is just suggestive of how this sport really honored Darrell Royal as one of the great coaches and the great innovators.
Darrell K. Royal, University of Texas. Wins 184. National championships 3. Conference championships 11. Recruits Tommy Nobis, James Street, Earl Campbell. Oklahoma doesn't have an inferiority complex. They are just plain inferior. And the sooner everyone accepts this as fact, we can just move on. Hook 'em horns.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what sets the two, Texas and Oklahoma, apart from any other rivalry. It's because Texas has always lorded it over the state of Oklahoma.
The Oklahoma Red River Bridge War with Texas in the early part of the 20th century, where Oklahoma's Governor Murray sends out the National Guard to protect their bridge. And so you had a lot of things, that were a lot of historical precedent for ill feelings even before they started playing football.
I remember when I moved to Oklahoma, taking Oklahoma history class, hearing about National Guards, being sent to the Red River.
Two states that are split by a river. One has had accolades forever about having heroes. The West was one in Texas.
I think it affects the way people think about themselves, not just about their favorite team, not just about their university or their football program.
Oklahomans think Texans are arrogant.
Everything's bigger in Texas, great, whatever.
And I think on Texas side, they think Oklahomans are inferior to them.
Whatever.
They're named the Sooners, named after the land rush where people left a little bit too soon.
Texas was viewed in an awful lot of years as the haves versus the have-nots.
Oklahomans, many, not everyone, but certainly many Oklahomans find their identity through football, and that identity is never so pronounced as when they can beat Texas.
When Oklahoma loses to Texas, there's a state of depression that goes on. Some folks, for 364 days, they live for that game. They have to have that. They have to win that game, and if they don't,
it's sackcloth and ashes. People don't want to get out of bed and get mad at the newspaper for whatever it wrote, for including the final score usually.
The University of Texas has always had this feeling about itself that we are the University of Texas. We are bigger and better, and we're Texas and you're not type of thing.
If you're ever fortunate enough to see a Texas OU game, you're going to see one of the great rivalries in the history of sports.
It's not just a football game. It's never been just a football game.
Plus, people in Texas say, well, you recruit all of our Texas boys, that's why you have a good team.
That's a constant source of frustration, it seemed like, from some from Texas, with players like Billy Sims and David Overstreet and Greg Pruitt, and just one after another crossing the Red River to come to Oklahoma.
Well, the reason for that is Texas has about 1,000 or more high schools, whereas Oklahoma has about 200 high schools in the state.
I've never really understood what the big deal was. I mean, you don't need a passport to cross a state line. People go to school all over America, wherever you want to go, so.
If you've got a school in the state of Texas, you can recruit on a bicycle. You just go around the neighborhoods and pick out the kids that are within 25 miles of where you're coaching.
Also, as you look at it, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is just a key recruiting ground for both teams. When you look at the rosters, when you look at the great players that have come out of here, and this game kind of sets the tone for the recruiting battles that go on going forward, are the lifeblood of both programs. I mean, it really is one of those things that goes beyond just one game, but it really defines two states.
You don't have to wonder year to year if the rivalry is going to be intense or passionate or loud. you can be assured of it.
The thing that has sustained the rivalry in football particularly is the Cotton Bowl and the way it's set up for the OU-Texas game. Right down the middle, split, 50-50.
Two horseshoes that come together, one orange, one red.
In other words, neither team has the home field advantage. Oklahoma to the south, Texas to the north on that stadium, and it's an incredible sight.
90,000 people that are going to be there, and half wearing orange and half wearing red.
I'd like to think of it as kind of like the Red Sox-Yankees on steroids.
Exactly in between the two campuses in Austin and Norman, and the fact that these two schools have played at an extremely high level in football for decades.
It's a classic border war that has so much to do with pride, and before they became conference rivals, it was that classic non-conference game that captured the imagination. And then you look at the coaches, the historical figures that have been in this game. But I think it comes down to state pride.
This is one of those rivalries that brings everything to the table, and there is a genuine level of dislike that may be at a fever pitch right now. I mean, this has continued through the decades. It's shown remarkable staying power, and I think it is the greatest rivalry in college football.
People in Texas will fry up a tarantula and call it calamari, and then slap a gob of Heinz ketchup on a side of beef and call it barbecue, Texas style. Boomer Sooner. There are a lot of people who have mean things to say about Barry Switzer, but since most of them send their kids to school wearing burnt orange, one must consider the source. The two groups of people you rarely hear talking bad about Switzer, and no, not even in Texas, are parents and players. And in a real way, that's insight into the man. Football may be watched by fans, analyzed by color commentators, and dissected by former coaches. But it is players and parents who feel every hit and stand breathlessly as their child is vilified by some adult wearing a different color. It is to these people whom Barry Switzer endeared himself. Barry identified and connected, like whole cloth, with every kid who knew what it was like to have a single pair of jeans and an empty carton of milk in the refrigerator. If Switzer's coaching was remarkable, 3 national championships and a routine thrashing of everything burnt orange, it was his keen ability to understand the depth of the human condition, with all its frailties and possibilities, that set him apart. 157 wins and a Super Bowl victory are the exclamation point, but the real story is the soul of the Arkansas man who was and is the bootlegger's boy.
Barry Switzer is what I call a lovable rogue.
Barry Switzer's a lightning rod. You either love Barry Switzer or you'd hate Barry Switzer.
He can, he can go all places and people fall in love with him. The possible exception probably is Austin, Texas.
Barry is well liked in Oklahoma, despised in Texas. See, that's what happens when you beat Texas too many times.
He was also a great football innovator. That he's the guy that pulled the trigger on the mid-season wishbone in 1970 and changed college football. I don't think he's ever gotten enough credit for that. That was a daring maneuver that worked out famously for Oklahoma.
Barry Switzer really defined the 70s. He was the guy who ran the wishbone, got the athletes to do it. Colorful guy, funny guy, told great stories, and it's hard to think of him now that he's still younger than Joe Paterno. He could be coaching the sidelines now. And you look back at it, one of 2 coaches to have won a national championship and a Super Bowl as well.
Barry doesn't have a major ego, all right? He's down to earth. His greatest skill is he can relate to players, which makes him an outstanding recruiter. So he's not your typical X's and O's coach.
Everybody says Barry doesn't coach football. He's not a great X's and O's guys. I disagree. It's the personality of Barry that he was so outlandish and so inspirational. But people forget that you've still got to be able to coach in this game, and he could coach.
I've always likened him to King David, a guy who was, slightly immoral, but a man after God's own heart. Well, Switzer's that way. He's slightly immoral, but a man after Oklahoman's own heart. So,
by his own admission, yeah, Barry Switzer may have bent the rules on a few occasions. I think the NCAA would confirm that. Certainly, that was something that bothered Darrell Royal quite a bit, and may have led to Darrell's retirement.
I mean, my first recollection of Texas OU as a kid growing up in New York was 1976 and the 6-6 tie, and then later coming to understand that Darrell Royal believed that Barry Switzer was spying on Texas that week, which was denied at the time, but then was later told to be the truth.
Now, if OU wasn't any good, there would be no Spygate. Back in the 70s, Texas coaches were saying that Barry spied on their practices. Maybe he did, but all fair in love and war. And OU Texas is definitely war.
On a day when the heavens opened and rain poured forth like an autumn apocalypse, the Sooners and the Longhorns played to a 15-15 tie. In Switzer's view, it was a game stolen from the Sooners. Although there was no instant replay back then, 25 years later, technology proves Barry had a legitimate gripe. The Longhorns on that rainy Saturday were assisted by 3 of the most improbable calls imaginable, the game's outcome turning on each. One could say that what happened to Switzer and the Sooners in that game was, well, Orwellian. But after all, it was 1984.
But 3 ineffective downs left the Sooners backed up to their own end zone. Rather than risking a punting miscue in the torrential rain, Barry Switzer decided to take a safety and free kick. And so, down by a field goal, Texas took possession with 2:10 to play and 56 yards of real estate to cover to protect their claim as America's top team. And then came the controversy. Oklahoma's Tony Casillas recovered a Texas fumble, but officials ruled that the ball carrier was already down when he lost the handle. A hotly disputed interference call gave Texas a first down on the OU 41-yard line. With just 19 seconds to play, quarterback Todd Dodge let fly a high, wobbly pass to the right corner of the end zone. OU's Stansbury emerged with the ball, but an official ruled him out of bounds. Despite strong Sooner protest, Texas was still alive. Shaken by so many close calls, Longhorn coach Fred Akers opted to spend the final play of the game on a field goal. Jeff Ward split the uprights. The scoreboard read 15 all, and the clock showed 0. The Longhorns were happy to escape without a loss, and the Sooners went home frustrated.
Barry Switzer, there's a guy that's, as long as Oklahoma's playing football, there's going to be some shrine to Barry Switzer, and fans are going to pay attention to it.
Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, wins 157. Conference championships, 12. National championships, 3. Recruits, Greg Pruitt, Billy Sims, Tony Casillas. Oklahoma may have won a few games in the series, I give you that. But could they win if their people weren't down here stealing our Texas players? Answer that. Hook 'em horns. People from Texas and Oklahoma know a thing or two about droughts, and one thing they've developed is the patience to wait them out. The 90s were like a drought. The teams weren't competing for national championships, and while many of the games entertained, they were something less than remarkable. It was still Texas and Oklahoma, but let's just say that during the 90s, it was rivalry with a lowercase r.
Well, the 90s with the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry was really everybody trying to hang on and probably nostalgic for another time because things weren't as great for either one. Oklahoma was probably in the doldrums a little bit more than the University of Texas was, but you look at these two teams and maybe this rivalry game was the only thing that really meant something. There were other teams in the conference that were actually doing better than the University of Texas and the University of Oklahoma. So really, when they came together at the Cotton Bowl, all they had was this rivalry and the discussion and the, you know, kind of the fights that kept this thing going until both teams got better between the chalk.
For a while, Texas and Oklahoma had not been competing for national championships. One would be up, the other would be down.
And then you have the 90s where both teams are falling on hard times. You can't find either one of them around very high in the polls. You're not talking about national championships. So it went through a time where it did not have as much national prominence, but one thing it did have is it still had the emotion of what took place in the Cotton Bowl at Fair Park during the Texas State Fair.
The 90s, being from Oklahoma as an OU student, we don't want to talk about the 90s. The 90s didn't exist in Oklahoma football history. That was the worst decade of Oklahoma football history ever, ever.
And for the years of the Big Eight, first Big Seven, then Big Eight, and then the Southwest Conference, it was like two warring nations that came together on one day and fought each other as hard as they could, and then they went away.
When we were in the Southwest Conference playing in the OU game, you went up there, it was a big game, it was a rivalry that it was a physical game, but a loss did not mean the end of your season.
When the Big 12 came in, and particularly the Big 12 South, it became a conference game, and so the dynamic of the game changed completely because if you lost that game, you were fighting an uphill battle to win the South Division.
Now with the formation of the Big 12, especially where it is today, you lose that game, you're scrambling because you don't even get a chance to play in the Big 12 championship game now. And that really is, I think, how this game has evolved over the years into the, I would, if it's hard to say, even more intense of a rivalry because now these players are fighting for their postseason lives.
We own Dallas one weekend a year. It's an Oklahoma stop on I-35. Boomer Sooner. The states of Texas and Oklahoma owe a debt to their fellow members of the Republic located to the east. That would be Tennessee and Ohio, the birthplaces of William Mack Brown and Robert Anthony Stoops. It is fitting that Stoops and Brown would arrive at their respective schools near the same moment in time. It was destiny's choice. Football at both schools needed an injection of something or someone new. At Texas and Oklahoma, the weight of past glory can be a troubling truth. The Ohioan, who played at Iowa and was one of 10 children, would now stand across the sideline one Saturday a year for the Tennessean with a stunning family pedigree who ventured into the Deep South to pursue his football dreams. In the rivalry games, the Stoops-led Sooners have swept down Interstate 35, taking 6 of the 9 games in this decade. But Texas has won 2 of the last 3. And ask anyone who knows, this rivalry is defined by the right now.
Mack Brown and Bob Stoops share something. They took over programs that had slipped a bit, quite honestly. OU had, after the Switzer era, sort of wandered a little bit. Stoops brought that institution back on an annual basis to national championship level. Texas was also looking to get back to that level. We're not talking about programs that had fallen apart, mind you. We're talking about longtime programs to whom 7 or 8 wins is a bad season. We only won 7 or 8 games. What, are you kidding me?
Texas makes the decision to hire Mack Brown. A year later, Oklahoma brings in the Florida defensive coordinator, Bob Stoops, and the total history of the Big 12 of those 2 schools and of college football has been the same since then.
Both of them had tremendous careers when they first started. First year Mack was at Texas. Ricky Williams won the Heisman. Texas went on to a very, very good year there. Bob Stoops' first season at Oklahoma was very effective. John Blake, as I said, had recruited some great players, and Oklahoma had a really wonderful year in 2000. They went on and won a national championship.
Mack knew, even though he's from North Carolina, Mack knew about the intensity of this rivalry because He was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma under Barry Switzer. Oh yeah, he was there in Oklahoma as well. So he knew about the rivalry, and he also knew that Texas had the most talent in the nation for football.
The first game in 1999 was Bob Stoops' first year, Mike Leach's first year as the offensive coordinator for the Oklahoma Sooners, and they had never seen the spread from Oklahoma. They had waited to roll that out the week of the Texas OU game just to show you how important this rivalry is. But they came out and just showed us a bunch of different looks. Needless to say, within the first 2.5 minutes of the game, they were up 17-0.
And then suddenly 2000 came. Bob Stoops up at Oklahoma had really started to turn things around and really laid one on Texas at 63-14. It was a stunning afternoon that changed the rivalry for the next 10 years.
I think that 05 game was 5 years of frustration coming out for Texas. Because not only was that Texas's national championship team, but that was the end of the streak.
I mean, clearly they have restored the rivalry because they have both recruited so well that the talent level has demanded that they be top 10 and top 5 programs.
Texas football is at a level unseen since the Darrell Royal days, after about 20 years of wandering in the wilderness. He's a wonderful coach. He had that stretch where he lost 5 straight to Bob Stoops, and people were disgruntled.
What has Bob Stoops done in his career? He's just, resurrected the monster. The team was down when he took over, and he's just been a terrific head coach, great recruiter, hires great coaches, all the things you need to win in this day and age, and it is tougher to win in this day and age than it was in Bud's day, and even perhaps a little bit in Switzer's.
To watch how Stoops really has had the upper hand for years in that game, has done really well, and Mack Brown has kind of tried to find a way to win the game. All of a sudden, the tides changed a little bit, and Mack Brown's starting to play, or get his team to play better in that game than OU, and has had a better record over the past few years. But that's kind of the way this game seems to go. It kind of ebbs and flows back and forth between Texas on top or OU on top.
The two dynamics there of two guys who will, I think, go down as two of the great coaches in college football history at the same time coaching against each other has really, ramped this rivalry up to the next level.
These coaches are just incredible coaches, but they share that one fact that each in his own way at his institution took a program and brought it back up to the very highest level of college football. You look now at the preseason polls in years in college football. You look at the 09 season, for instance, the top 5 in the country, both of them are there. That is not unusual. Texas and Oklahoma, under Brown and Stoops, have shared a rise back to prominence, and it's made this game even more of a glitter game, a central game on a college football level.
Mack Brown, University of Texas, wins 129, conference championships won, national championships won. Recruits: Cedric Benson, Vince Young, Colt McCoy. Bob Stoops, Oklahoma, wins 109, conference championships 6, national championships 1. Recruits: Adrian Peterson, Sam Bradford, Mark Clayton. Have you been to Oklahoma? That's all I gotta say. Just go there, and then you'll know why everyone leaves. To those people, coming to Dallas once a year, it must feel like a weekend pass. Hook 'em horns. Can anyone predict the future of the Red River Rivalry? No one could say, but we can look at the past for guidance. Both institutions are vibrant, growing, and thriving, and the game is more popular than ever. There may never be good relations between the fans, but the players share real respect. It is fall. It is the State Fair of Texas, and on some Saturday in October, it's a tale of 2 cities, 2 states, and a single game that connects them and divides them. Nowhere is it bigger than Texas and Oklahoma.
This game not only decides a conference many years, not only decides this fantastic head-to-head rivalry, this game has tremendous national championship implications. How many years have each team come into this game thinking we win this game and it's downhill to the national championship?
It's bigger than, to me, Michigan, Ohio State, because both of those teams could be flat. They don't have a playoff system at the end of their conference season. The Big 12 has a playoff game. USC, Notre Dame, they're not in the same conference. Again, you can go down the list. Florida, Georgia, LSU, and the teams that they play. They're good. Even Texas A&M, that's good, but nothing can compare to Texas, Oklahoma.
That combination has lasted and has stood the test of time. And I think when you look back on rivalries that survive and thrive, this one has. And it is one that will always be there because football is part of the fiber of the state of Texas and the state of Oklahoma.
It is going to be a battle for 60 minutes and in something where the rookies or the freshmen that go on the field don't really understand it because they've never been in a physical game like that. And afterwards, they you look over at the rookies and it's like they've just been through a train wreck. They didn't really understand what had just run over them. And you're like, hey, that's Texas OU. That's the way it is every time. Get ready.
I'd say the best thing about this rivalry is the quality of the two teams. Rivalries sometimes suffer, I think, historically, because one team will get way better than the other and stay that way for a while. That's not been true of this rivalry. This rivalry's gone back and forth as each school has had eras of enormous success. And then we get those wonderful years in which each team is having enormous success. And we're in the midst of one of those periods right now.
I think it is the best rivalry in college football. I think that's so because not only is it one big group of players, usually Texas players, but it also comes from two different states. When you start talking about the Iron Bowl with Auburn, Alabama, they're from one state. When you pit one state against another state, and one state has star players from the other state, I think you have so many factors that go into making this the best rivalry in college football.
I think Oklahoma-Texas is the best rivalry in college football with the possible exception of Army-Navy. I haven't cared who won an Army-Navy game in about 40 years, but I still get a lump in my throat every time I watch one of their games. So if you're a true blue American patriot and you want to call Army-Navy number one, it's okay by me. Otherwise, it's Oklahoma-Texas.
110 years of Texas OU. Imagine how long that is.
I've covered more than 30 of them, and you know, the one thing it lacks is that they only play it once a year.